In this episode, we're diving into another chilling case. One that's not for the faint of heart. So buckle up. On the evening of May 28, 2012, 29-year-old Giulia Tramontano vanished from the quiet Italian town of Sinigo. She was 7 months pregnant. Suddenly, she stopped answering calls and texts from her family and friends. Her phone went silent. It was her boyfriend, Eliandro Impadiello, who first raised the alarm. He told everyone that when he came home from work, the apartment was empty. Giulia was gone. No explanation, no note. But almost immediately, the case began to show cracks. Giulia had left behind nearly all of her personal belongings. She had plans for the days ahead, nothing to suggest she intended to disappear. And when investigators began retracing her final steps, the trail only grew darker. The night before she went missing, Giulia had a heated argument with Eliandro. She confided in her mother, Loredana, and a close friend, describing in messages how distressed she felt. Her words painted a picture of someone deeply upset, caught in a situation weighing heavily on her. Yet the central question remained unanswered. What really happened that night? Giulia left the house on her own, but why did no one ever see her again? In the days that followed, detectives began peeling back layers of lies that would eventually reveal a terrible truth. Born on May 2nd, 1994, in Naples, Giulia grew up in a close-knit family that valued tradition as much as independence. She was raised with love, support, and the confidence to stand on her own. From a young age, Giulia thrived in the arts, but her true passion was real estate. She loved architecture, the challenge of business, and the promise of success. After high school, she studied real estate at university, quickly building a reputation for her sharp mind and eloquence. By 25, Giulia had already made a name for herself, but her ambition outgrew the opportunities in her hometown. At 26, she made a bold move, leaving Naples for Milan, a city full of promise. For her, Milan symbolized freedom, new connections, and growth. She packed her belongings, said her goodbyes, and set off to start a new life. In Milan, Giulia wasted no time. She immersed herself in the competitive real estate market, attending networking events, closing deals, and building friendships. But despite the excitement, she longed for something more, something beyond work. That's when she met Eliandro Impadiello. Born in 1993, Eliandro's life in Milan seemed polished on the surface. As a bartender at a luxury hotel, he mingled with the wealthy, the powerful, and the glamorous. To everyone around him, he appeared confident, charismatic, and well-connected. But beneath the charm, Eliandro's life was unstable. He carefully curated an image of success, hiding his true struggles behind easy smiles and smooth words. His coworkers saw him as fun but shallow. His clients thought he was living the dream. The truth was far more complicated. When Giulia met him, he was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely caring. They clicked instantly. Within weeks, they were inseparable, dining out, taking late-night walks, dreaming of the future. Eliandro confessed that he had a son from a previous relationship, but assured Giulia that his past was behind him. Giulia believed she had finally found someone to share her life with. They moved in together after only a few months. But soon, cracks began to show. Eliandro's jokes, once playful, turned cruel. He mocked Giulia's southern accent, insulted her favorite sports team in public, and criticized her over trivial matters at home. Giulia brushed it off at first, but the comments became cutting, relentless. Arguments grew frequent. Eliandro would flare up over small things, then withdraw, cold and distant, only to switch back to affection as though nothing had happened. The emotional roller coaster left Giulia confused, walking on eggshells, unsure of what version of Eliandro she'd face each day. And behind it all, Alejandro was hiding an even bigger secret. Unbeknownst to Julia, Alejandro was living a double life. At work, he met Algra, a younger woman climbing the ranks of the hotel industry. To her, Alejandro presented himself as single, claiming that Julia was just a roommate who'd soon be moving out. Neither woman knew the other existed. To Julia, he was her partner. To Algra, he was her future. Alejandro juggled the lies effortlessly, romantic with one, promising with the other, never considering the consequences. Meanwhile, Julia began noticing changes in her body. By late 2022, she suspected something was different. Tiredness, unusual cravings, and a missed period led her to take a pregnancy test. 2 lines. Positive. Julia was overwhelmed. She'd always dreamed of starting a family, but the timing, with Alejandro distant and volatile, was troubling. Still, she knew she had to tell him. When she finally shared the news, Alejandro's reaction was chilling. His first words, "Are you sure?" No excitement, no curiosity, no warmth. He avoided the subject entirely in the days that followed. No mention of doctor's appointments, no talk of the future. Julia felt alone, but she clung to hope that his attitude would change. It never did. Instead, Alejandro's secret life spiraled further. In early 2023, Algra also discovered she was pregnant. Like Julia, she believed she and Alejandro were building a future together. She had no idea another woman, another pregnancy, existed. The lies were closing in, and the stage was set for tragedy. Unlike Julia, Algra wasn't sure if she wanted to keep her pregnancy, and Alejandro saw this as an opportunity. His carefully balanced web of lies was beginning to collapse, and he persuaded Algra that having a child wasn't the best idea. He promised to support her no matter what, but his message was clear. An abortion was the only way forward. After much thought, Algra agreed. Alejandro went with her to the medical procedure, closing one chapter of his deception. With Algra's pregnancy resolved, he turned his focus back to Julia, whom he now saw as the real obstacle. But Julia was determined. Despite Alejandro's emotional coldness and pressure, she refused to end her pregnancy. For her, the baby wasn't a problem. It was her future. Even if her relationship with Alejandro was over, she was ready to raise the child on her own. What she didn't know was that her choice had just sealed her fate. By late 2022, Alejandro realized he was losing control. Julia's firm decision disrupted his plans, and in desperation, he searched for another way out. His answer, poison. Obsessively, he scoured the internet, studying substances that could kill without raising suspicion. He researched everything, from natural toxins to deadly chemicals like cyanide and ricin. But most were either too difficult to obtain or left traces that coroners could easily detect. Then he found his weapon, rodenticides, readily available, sold over the counter, and known to cause internal bleeding, dizziness, and weakness, symptoms easily mistaken for pregnancy complications. It was the perfect disguise. In early 2023, he began to poison Julia slowly, slipping the substance into her food and drinks. Within weeks, Julia's health began to decline. She complained of fatigue, nausea, dizziness, and sharp stomach pains. To her, it felt like a difficult pregnancy. To her friends, it seemed unfortunate but normal. But in truth, it was calculated murder. Yet Alejandro grew frustrated. Julia's body resisted. The pregnancy held strong, and the poison wasn't working as fast as he wanted. His carefully laid plan was failing, and his anger grew. Meanwhile, Alejandro's double life began to unravel. Algra had long ignored the red flags, the evasiveness, the vague answers about his past. But her doubts deepened after she accidentally found photos of him and Julia on his phone. The closeness in those pictures was undeniable. When she confronted him, Alejandro spun another lie. Julia was a bitter ex who refused to let go. He even fabricated a fake DNA test, claiming it proved the baby wasn't his. At first, Algra wanted to believe him, but the desperation in his story only heightened her suspicion. One night, while Alejandro slept, she used his phone to call Julia directly. The voice on the other end wasn't that of a jealous ex. It was of a woman exhausted, betrayed, but still clinging to clarity. The two women agreed to meet. They met at the hotel where Algra worked. The tension was thick, but their determination stronger. Algra went first, sharing everything she knew. The lies, the excuses, the fake DNA test. Julia listened quietly, then calmly revealed her side, that she and Alejandro were still living together, that she was indeed pregnant, and that he had never broken things off. With each exchange, the truth came into focus. They had both been deceived, manipulated into playing roles in Alejandro's double life. By the end of their conversation, what began as confrontation turned into solidarity. They weren't enemies. They were survivors of the same cruel game. For Julia, that meeting marked the end. She was done. When she returned home, she told Alejandro directly. She knew everything, and their relationship was over. She planned to return to Naples to be with her family. That night, she texted her mother and sister, sharing her decision. They supported her fully, ready to welcome her back. But she never made it home. Alejandro realized the walls were closing in. Julia knew too much. His lies, his double life, his manipulations, they were all exposed. When she began packing to leave, he tried to sway her with words, then with anger. Julia stayed calm, refusing to argue. Her silence only fueled his rage. Then, in a blind frenzy, he snapped. He grabbed a knife from the counter and launched a brutal attack. The violence was swift, frenzied, uncontrollable. 37 stab wounds. When it was over, Alejandro stood frozen, staring at Julia's lifeless body. Reality sank in. He had crossed the point of no return. Panicked, he dragged her body into the bathroom, doused it with alcohol, and set it alight, hoping the flames would erase his crime. But the fire failed. Her remains were still recognizable, and the bathroom bore the unmistakable signs of a struggle. Terrified, he tried to clean the apartment, scrubbing at the blood with rags and cleaning products. But no matter how hard he worked, the stains wouldn't disappear. Still, Alejandro clung to the idea that he could outsmart the truth. He staged Julia's disappearance, sending texts from her phone to family and friends. In them, Julia supposedly said she needed time alone. The vague wording was meant to buy him time, to make it seem like she had left willingly. And then, in a chilling move, Alejandro reported Julia missing to the police himself. He claimed she had walked out after an argument and never returned. He even insisted her belongings and passport were gone. But investigators weren't convinced. His story was too neat, too rehearsed. While Julia's family wept with fear, Alejandro remained calm, almost detached. His performance raised suspicion, and while police began their search, he worked to move Julia's remains, first hiding them in the bathroom, then wrapping them in plastic, then, under the cover of night, carrying them to the garage. The facade was crumbling. Over the following days, Alejandro moved Julia's remains several times. At first, he stashed them in the basement of their apartment building, then returned them to the garage as he wrestled with a grim dilemma: how to dispose of them forever. But hesitation became his downfall. The longer he waited, the more mistakes he made, each one leaving a trail investigators would later piece together. Police began scrutinizing his statements, questioning neighbors, and checking for cracks in his story. Alejandro still believed he was in control, but quietly, the authorities were closing in. When he officially reported Julia as missing, investigators followed standard procedure. The first breakthrough came swiftly. Forensic specialists uncovered blood traces inside his car, despite his attempts to scrub it clean. Modern forensic tools revealed what soap and water could not. The blood was Julia's. The second piece of damning evidence appeared in the apartment building itself. Faint reddish smears along staircases and hallways seemed like dust or spilled liquid at first glance. Yet chemical testing exposed them as bloodstains, only partially wiped away. Meanwhile, Alejandro's behavior raised alarms. He lacked the anguish most people show when a loved one disappears. He didn't plead with Julia's family for help, nor did he organize any search or public appeals. He did only the bare minimum, filing a missing person report and nothing more. His cold detachment made suspicions grow. Detectives escalated their investigation by seizing his electronics. On his phone, computer, and tablet, they uncovered disturbing search histories dating back months. He had studied poisons, their effects, and even why certain toxins sometimes failed. This wasn't a crime of impulse. It was the work of someone planning ahead. Another shocking revelation emerged. The fake DNA test Alejandro had once presented to Algra. Forensic analysts proved it had been falsified, edited from an online template used to manipulate medical records. Piece by piece, his web of lies unraveled. Investigators pressed harder, pointing out contradictions with every interrogation. At first, he clung to his story, but detectives countered with irrefutable evidence, bloodstains, his search history, and witness testimonies of violent arguments inside the flat. Surveillance footage then delivered the breakthrough. Days after Julia's disappearance, cameras captured Alejandro entering the garage multiple times, carrying bags and returning empty-handed. Under mounting pressure, his resolve collapsed. Eventually, he revealed the location of Julia's body. On June 1st, 2023, police discovered her remains in an overgrown area near Sonego. Forensic analysis showed an attempt to burn the body, but the process had been interrupted. Despite his efforts to erase the crime, investigators reconstructed the truth. Julia had been murdered, and Alejandro was responsible. Italy reeled in horror as news of Giulia Tramontano's death spread. In a nation already grappling with femicide, where more than one woman a week is killed by a partner or ex-partner, her story struck a painful chord. Outrage ignited protests across the country. Women flooded the streets of Milan, Naples, Rome, and beyond, demanding stronger protections and harsher penalties for domestic violence. Giulia's sister, Carla Tramontano, stood at one of these rallies, her voice breaking as she urged lawmakers to act before more lives were lost. While the public mourned, experts probed deeper into Alejandro's psychology. Court-appointed psychiatrists diagnosed him with severe narcissistic traits. He displayed no genuine remorse. Interrogations revealed a man consumed by control and image, incapable of empathy. For him, people existed only to serve his ego. When Giulia's independence threatened that control, his response turned lethal. During the trial, Alejandro attempted to portray his actions as a sudden outburst, claiming he didn't understand how he could commit such horror. But the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Months of poison research, the staged DNA test, his lies to both Giulia and Algra, and the deliberate cover-up. This was no crime of passion. It was premeditated. Algra herself testified, recounting how he deceived her with falsified documents and manipulated her repeatedly. The courtroom watched her break down, burdened by guilt, even though she too had been a victim of his lies. After the trial, she vanished from the public eye, leaving Milan in search of a fresh start away from the shadows of the case. In the end, the court convicted Alessandro Impagnatiello of first-degree murder, citing aggravating factors: the cruelty of the act, prolonged psychological abuse, and deliberate destruction of evidence. He received a life sentence. The judge made it clear: such crimes cannot be excused by fleeting rage. Alejandro's behavior over months proved intent. Julia's story became more than just a tragedy. It ignited a movement, a reminder that when partners are treated as possessions, the consequences can be fatal. Her death inspired thousands to demand change, and her name continues to echo in Italy's fight against gender-based violence. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. See you in the next video.